Fantasy Football Show. My name is Adam Levitan. As always, joined by Michael Leone to discuss some late season booms for the playoffs. In other words, players we think are ascending or rising here as we approach the fantasy football playoffs. Leone, how's it going today?
It's going well. We got Bills football tonight, so excited for that.
Yes, another Thursday night Bills game for Leone's Bills. What are we wearing today, Leone? It looks like a Thurman Thomas
Yes,
authentic to me.
you've got it. I'm
Yes.
going the wrong way.
Unfortunately, people watching this show have no idea who Thurman Thomas is. However, we do, and that is all that matters. All right, on today's show, we are going to discuss six of our favorite late season booms for the playoffs. We'll also get to as many chats as we can. So if you guys have any questions, if they're reasonable questions, feel free to put them in the chat, and we will get to as many as we can over the next 30 minutes here. Let's start with player number 6, I believe it will be on our list for late season booms, and that is Jameson Williams. So just an unreal run out for Jameson Williams. Clearly was being misused by John Morton, the offensive coordinator who took over for Ben Johnson. Dan Campbell gets in there, starts calling plays. Next thing you know, he's running all these crossing routes, which Jared Goff has called a cheat code. He's running stop routes and he starts going off. And then Sam Laporta goes down, maybe for the season with a back injury. And then they get 6 straight games in the dome where Jared Goff splits are just so much better. So I couldn't really handpick a better run out here for Jameson Williams starting this week against the Giants, Leone. A lot of Lions love down the stretch here. I think you're going to be happy you have Lions over the next 6 weeks, I think.
Yeah, absolutely. Those dome games in the playoff fantasy playoffs are nice. Not only is Campbell utilizing Jameson Williams better, he's calling more throws in general for Detroit. Their highest two pass rate over expectation games this season were the last 2 weeks. And with the Laporta injury, just to add some numbers to that, on this season, Amon-Ra St. Brown, about a 33% target per route run. JMO, 17% target per route run. Jahmyr Gibbs, 26%. Those are really good numbers, but if you look at it with Laporta out, they just explode like kind of double that, much higher. So the per route runs is just so incredible without Laporta.
I know. So excited about the Lions starting this weekend. Really, really good spot home against the Giants. Let's go to number 2 on the list. It is Derrick Henry. I'm not familiar. I'm not sure if you're familiar with D. Hember, Leone, but we are approaching the time of year where Derrick Henry's yards per carry and efficiency has spiked. I'm curious if you think that there's anything there or if this is just noise. Like the narrative would be Derrick Henry is so big, it gets cold, it's hard to tackle when you're cold. Derrick Henry is in this incredible shape. Other guys aren't in as great of shape. I don't know, man. I kind of think it's randomness that he's outperformed in December versus other months, but regardless, you get a Ravens team that is desperate for wins and has a bunch of good matchups coming up. Twice against the Bengals, they'll play. And then also they get the Jets game here this week. So yeah, I'm curious what you think about Derrick Henry and the whole D. Hember thing, Leone.
Yeah. Well, you mentioned the matchups before we get into December stuff. We asked the co-pilot about the easiest running back schedules rest of the way. You get the Patriots, the Dolphins, the Commanders up there. But you also get a couple guys on our list, including Derrick Henry with an easy schedule. Uh, and I think they have him as the fourth best schedule remaining. And in terms of looking at those opponents, it starts with the Jets this week. They traded some defensive players to get draft picks, and now they're facing also Cincinnati twice more on the schedule, which is just phenomenal matchup for Derrick Henry. Also think that he's run a little bit bad to start the season. The injuries to Lamar, the team just hasn't quite clicked. But it doesn't seem like there's anything wrong with Henry himself. I still think he's the same old. And down the stretch, whether there's something to, those cold weather games and him being a big bruising body, that being even tougher on opponents, I don't know. But you're sort of free rolling that anyways, because as you said, just a player on the rise with these matchups. So really excited for Henry's back half of the fantasy year.
All right. Yes. Number 3 on the list is going to be a little bit off the board here. Trey Benson of the Arizona Cardinals. So Trey Benson was set for a breakout role. James Conner went down. Benson was going to get an incredible amount of work. The very next week after James Conner got hurt, Trey Benson went down. He's been out for roughly 2 months now, but back in practice here this week. I don't think that they really like Michael Carter whatsoever. Amari DiMercado has a high ankle sprain. He's gonna be out for a while. That leaves them with Bam Knight as really the only guy I think they like other than Trey Benson. They got to get a look at Trey Benson here. I mean, this is what he was ticketed for. James Conner moves on eventually, and Trey Benson becomes the feature back. You also get them playing with Jacoby Brissett right now, which is up the efficiency on the offense, put them in the scoring position way more. So Trey Benson's a guy that I want to have on my bench, on my IR spot, see how this plays out. They do have two very, very good matchups down the stretch. So, yeah, Leone, any thoughts on Cardinals backfield rest of season?
Yeah, I mean, I was excited for Benson, like you said, when the Connor injury occurred, and this offense has gotten a jolt with Jacoby Brissett at quarterback. They're, running kind of this shorter, higher completion rate percentage stuff. It's really boosted the total offensive plays for the offense, and obviously, that's going to be really good for the running back that's back there for that overall success. Benson was pretty highly drafted. So I think he was the number two RB in that class, and now sort of his time to shine in terms of the running back touches that even Bam Knight was getting, before kind of getting banged up. And like you said, they don't like Michael Connor or um,
Michael Carter, yeah.
Michael Carter, excuse me, throwing off my game here, but they got Knight up to 60% of rushes in one of the games, kind of getting the goal line work. There's plenty of pass volume for running backs in this offense as well. It's been kind of split before the DiMercado injury with him kind of playing the pass down stuff and then some base work going to Michael Carter and Bam Knight. When you start to condense these opportunities onto the top running back, it's going to be a real good fantasy value for Benson.
All right. Let's get to some chats from the people here. We appreciate all the questions and everybody hanging out. Josh says Trey Tucker or Christian Watson this week. So I do think Trey Tucker is set up like reasonably. Him and Brock Bowers are really the only guys that I would trust there for the Raiders. It is a difficult matchup this week against a very good Cleveland defense. The total in this game is 36 and a half. So, you know, my lean would be Christian Watson, who has played better, but on raw volume, you're probably going to get more Tucker targets. What do you think here, Leone? Tucker or Christian Watson?
I think I'd go Christian Watson here. I know Tucker's a little bit safer for volume, but I think I want to kind of bet on the efficiency upside when it's this close between two guys. We had the two touchdowns from Watson last week, really big deep threat. I'm going to go with the efficiency upside of Watson.
Yeah, I lean that way too. Uh, Clever Comet says Juwan Johnson or Dawson Knox. So Knox, of course, is playing without Dalton Kincaid. So I think Dawson Knox is actually going to lead all pass catchers for the Bills in routes tonight. He's going to be out there running a ton of routes. We have a pretty big sample of Leone's Bills with Knox as the starter. It's not overly exciting. Juwan Johnson, on the other hand, gets a home game against the Falcons. No Shaheed. Juwan Johnson's been their number two pass catcher pretty much every number three pass catcher and sometimes number two, even when Shaheed was there. So what do you think about that one? Leone Knox or Juwan Johnson?
I got to go against my Bills. As you said, we do have a sample with Knox without Kincaid, and it's just not a ton of volume. You're kind of betting on a touchdown or bust. Now, it's a good team to bet on that for, but if you're in a full PPR league, I'm going to go with Juwan Johnson. Um, no Shaheed, as you mentioned. That's going to condense the targets that were already pretty condensed. Johnson pretty much every week's between 70 to 80% route run, which is really good for a tight end, up to about an 18% target share on the season. Expect him there the rest of the way. So the volume is just much safer for Jawan.
All right. Legendary Kev says, is Davis Mills throwing for 225? I have good news for you, Kev, because we actually price this stuff ourselves using our projections and our sims, and we make Davis Mills plus 122 to go over 225 yards in this game tonight. So special treat for you there. uh, legendary Kev plus 122 is what we make it on Mills over 225 tonight.
Yeah, the
E
Bills are definitely a bit of a run funnel. Not a bit. They are like the biggest run funnel in the NFL, which is kind of weird because they're often, in this spot where they're 6 point favorites and you think the other team's gonna have to throw a whole bunch, but they choose to run. The Bills kind of give them that, and they've been just even worse this year, not limiting the explosive plays. We've seen it from Sean Tucker, Devin Achan the past couple weeks. So I expect the Texans to stick with the ground game if they can get it going early, which is part of the reason why we don't have Mills as a favorite to go over that 225 mark.
Yep. E Wiseman says Trey. I assume he's talking about Tucker. I think Trey, Rico Dowdle, Kyron. Which two do I start? Unless he's talking about another Trey. I can't think of another Trey right now. I don't think if he's talking about Benson, I do
McBride.
not think Benson will be ready for full workload here this week. So yeah, I'd probably just go Rico and Kyron unless there's another Trey I'm missing here, Leone.
No, I don't think so. I think Rico and Kyron, I know neither of them have the best of matchups with Carolina at San Francisco. Um, But yeah, I think you got to stick with these backs. They performed well over the course of the season. I'm still amazed at Rico Dotto's efficiency. What an upgrade that's been over Chuba Hubbard. And Kyron's flashed some efficiency in a tough spot last week against Seattle. And I think when the chips get down, they're the guy they trust with the high value touches in terms of goal line work, pass routes out of the backfield. So even though Blake Corum's been a little bit annoying, Kyron's pretty clearly an every week starter.
Last chat before we get back to our list here. Frozen Octopus needs to sit one out of these four. Barkley, James Cook, Rico Dowdle, and Chase Brown. My God, what a team Frozen Octopus has. He has to sit one out of Barkley. I'm not sitting Barkley against Dallas. That's for sure. James Cook, tough matchup tonight against Houston. Rico Dowdle, we just talked about the efficiency, and Chase Brown's just a total smash. Might get Burrow back also here. God, I don't want to sit any of these guys here, Leone. What do you think?
Yeah, and we have them all projected like really close around that 16 half PPR point marker. I think for me, I'm sitting Rico with Chase Brown. There's a chance we get Burrow back this week, and even if we don't, the Samaje Perine injury has been huge for him. He's gone from like 30%, 40% route share to 80% route share the last 2 weeks. Had a design carry share around 80%. They don't trust anybody else now that Perine's out. It's all Chase Brown. Some efficiency concerns, but if Burrow is back, um, I think I would play him over Rico. I think you got to play your studs with Cook and Barkley, even with the projections being close. I would always side with the studs when the projections are close.
Yep. All right. Let's get back to our list here of players we like to boom late in the season. Number four on the list is RJ Harvey. Now, I know it's disappointing for Harvey in the box score last week. That was against the Chiefs. He has much better matchups coming up, including one coming up here after the bye against the Commanders. RJ Harvey outsnapped the other guys 34 to 8. Each of them played 8 McLaughlin and Tyler Bidet. So yeah, RJ Harvey. And I don't think that people are like, oh, see, McLaughlin was the goal line back. Sean Payton's crazy. Harvey had 3 straight touches to get them down to the 8 yard line. He was a little bit gassed. He comes off the field. McLaughlin gets the next 2 carries and he scores. So I don't think it was an intentional thing to take Harvey off the field around the goal line. And as you see there on the screen, RJ Harvey has been very good at scoring touchdowns while J.K. Dobbins was there. So I'm still super optimistic on RJ Harvey here. If you can stomach the bye week, I like trying to trade for him for rest of season. Any more thoughts on Broncos backfield, Leone?
Yeah, it's the perfect time to buy. I mean, you kind of got the performance you wanted if you're looking to trade for RJ Harvey. You got reaffirmed that the workload's going to be good, 61% snap share that you alluded to. Just for reference, J.K. Dobbins only went over 60% snap share once, and was providing pretty significant value um, in this offense for the Broncos. So that's a really big deal to see that. We always kind of knew it was going to be a tougher matchup and he might not get there. Then you get the bye week, so people aren't excited. Definitely the perfect time to trade for a rookie that we hope, ascends second half of the year is going to have all the opportunity in front of him.
Number five on the list is Brock Purdy. Couple things going on with Brock Purdy right now. First, toe seems healthy, and that was going to be, a big question. They said he might not get back to 100%. Came out of last week's game healthy on the toe. Just as importantly, just as importantly, this defense that the 49ers have is just woeful. I mean, gosh, they're bad. And it's not even their fault. They have lost so many guys to injury. So a lot of potential shootouts down the stretch here for Brock Purdy. And he gets everybody healthy. I know Brandon Ayuk's not healthy, but Pearsall's back. Kittle's healthy. McCaffrey's healthy. Jawan Jennings is healthy. So really good spot, I think, for Brock Purdy rest of season. Leone, can he compete with some of these actual elite quarterbacks, though, that we've seen like Hurts and Allen and Lamar, et cetera?
I don't think he's going to get up to that top five elite status. I'm not sure there's enough rushing upside from Purdy to get there. But if you look at someone like what Baker Mayfield did last year, where you could be this QB6 sort of spot, I think he can provide that sort of value for you rest of season. 3 out of the 4 seasons in the NFL, he's had a touchdown rate over 7%, even led the league one year with a 7% touchdown rate, consistently at like 8 yards per attempt or higher, which is among the best in the NFL. And this is a team that, at times his value has been held in check because the defense has been really, really good. And you hit on the fact that they're not anymore. So we get some volume to go along with the efficiency that's always been there and really insulated with the bodies that you mentioned that are healthy now. Kittle's back, looking good. Pearsall's back. Jawan Jennings seems like he's finally healthy. Seems he's been healthy all year. Knock on wood that continues. So really excited to see what Purdy can do down the stretch here.
All right, which leads us to our final name on the list for players who will boom in the fantasy playoffs. That is Saquon Barkley. I believe you have a co-pilot help there, Leone, on this one. But yeah, this schedule for the Eagles coming up, and it sucks that Lane Johnson got hurt, and that really gives me pause here on on Saquon. But they play the Cowboys this week, Bears. They also get the Raiders, Commanders, Bills. I mean, those are some incredible spots for the Eagles to score a lot of touchdowns and Saquon Barkley to break off big plays. What we've seen this year is just not a lot of running room, defensive lines in the backfield. I'm not sure that Dallas, Chicago, Raiders, Commanders, Bills defensive line is really all that capable of that. So it's been a struggle for Barkley to find space. Get him space, though. I think he's looked really, really good. So I don't want to panic on Saquon Barkley with this schedule down the stretch. Leone, any more Barkley thoughts?
Yeah, as you mentioned, Google Copilot, similar to the Derrick Henry thing, when we look at easiest running back schedules, kind of tied in fourth there was Baltimore and Philly. You hit on some of the teams that they're facing, including in the championship week. They've got Buffalo, who we've got as allowing the third most fantasy points to the running back position in our DVP tool over at Establish a Run, which takes into account, the strength of the running backs that the defenses have faced. So it's adjusted for that. Washington, that you mentioned, is in the bottom 10 there as well. So just a lot of really strong matchups. I hope they can give him the space. I feel like he hasn't lost any juice. It's kind of the offense that hasn't given him the space to operate and break these big plays. But I really do think they're going to come down the stretch starting this week at Dallas. So, perfect time to try and acquire Saquon, where he's only had 1 or 2 good games. People are kind of getting annoyed and frustrated. I do think he's a very good buy down the stretch. Expect him to be a top 3 to 5 back rest of the way.
All right. We got time for a few more questions here from the people. Carl Winschig says, Josh Downs or Jerry Judy this week? I believe in Shadur. Oh my God. He believes in Shadur, Leone. I think it's going to be Josh Downs for me, even a difficult matchup. If you do believe in Shadur, though, we don't have him completing a very high percentage of his passes. If he goes out there and does, it'll certainly be Judy. What do you think, Leone? Downs, who seems to have fallen behind both Pittman and Alec Pierce now, or Jerry Judy?
Yeah, we've got this projected pretty tight because that role change for Downs in terms of his pecking order and the target tree is not as good. But I'd still go with Downs here. I think you're less likely to get a catastrophic result, which you could get with Shador Sanders. Even if you believe in him, the floor is not very high here. And I'm excited to see what Downs can do in a spot where they're, projected in more of a negative script. He's someone that in these three wide receiver sets, only playing in the slot, he's going to struggle a little bit more when they're playing from ahead and playing kind of more of these, run-oriented game plans, which have been a lot of them because they've been so successful overall. In a weird way, them being a little bit more inefficient, but having more pass volume overall, I think is going to help him from a fantasy perspective, especially in full PPR leagues. So I would go Downs there.
All right. Tyler Thomas says Jawan Johnson or Dalton Schultz. So we already talked about Jawan Johnson in this role without Rashid Shaheed in the dome. Dalton Schultz tonight against the Bills. I don't know, man. Refuse to play Jalen Noel. They refuse to raise Jaden Higgins' role. I don't feel great. I don't feel great about Dalton Schultz here in this spot, but at tight end, this is the kind of decisions you have to make. Jawan Johnson or Dalton Schultz, Leone.
Yeah, we've got Schultz a little bit higher. I'd probably go there. These last three games with Mills, he's put up target shares of 20%, 24%, 22%. So some safety there. I'd lean this way, but it's pretty close to a coin flip.
Bama Lover says playoff spot already secured. Shout out to you, Bama Lover. Would you trade Josh Jacobs for Chase Brown? So Josh Jacobs dealing with this knee injury. Interestingly enough, Josh Jacobs was able to get back in practice today. So even if Jacobs does not play this week, seems like he has a pretty good chance to return for week 13. So assuming Jacobs is healthy here, Leone, what do you think? Jacobs or Chase Brown? And by the way, a lot of this is going to depend on Samaje Perine status. I have not seen many updates on Samaje Perine status other than when he went down. It looked like a legit high ankle sprain.
Yeah, I was gonna ask if you knew when P Ryan would be back because I think if we knew P Ryan would be out, I think I'd actually side Chase Brown here and not deal with the guy that's dealing with an injury, even if it looks good for him to come back soon. Especially coupled with the fact that it legitimately looks like Burrow is going to be back, even if maybe they're a little bit out of playoff contention. If he's very close to playing this week, it seems very likely he'll play next week. So would like to get a better read on P Ryan, but I also like the schedule a little bit better for the Bengals here in the playoffs. They get
Yeah.
Miami and Arizona in week 16 and 17. So might be contrarian, but I'll go Chase Brown here.
Okay. Yeah. Uh, Damn Cold Dave says Raiders might have the toughest schedule rest of season. Yes, if you were listening to previous shows, Damn Cold Dave, we talked plenty about Ashton Genty as a sell pretty much every time that he had a good game. The upcoming schedule for the Raiders is just absolutely brutal from a defensive perspective. Spicy Sponge says Chris Olave or Romeo Dobbs. So Leone's a big Romeo Dobbs fan. However, even he, I do not think, could play Romeo Dobbs over Chris Olave when Chris Olave, I believe, is second in the league in targets per game. Shaheed is gone. They're in a dome here. So, yeah, I think it's pretty easily Olave for me over Dobbs here, Leone.
Yep, 29% target share for Olave in that first game without Shaheed. And it was nice to see him catch a long touchdown with Shuck back there. Obviously some uncertainty with the quarterback switch. As bad as Rattler was, he was feeding these guys from a fantasy perspective okay. So that makes me feel a little bit better. Would definitely go Olave here and take the volume side of things.
Zachman says, would you start Jacoby Myers this week? Well, it's hard to say without knowing what your other option is. I would just say that I thought Jacoby came in and actually had a really good role last week and probably is a better NFL wide receiver than Parker Washington. Now, Brian Thomas coming back is going to lower our projection on Jacoby Myers here this week. But yeah, it's a reasonable spot. What do you think about Jacoby Myers this week, Leone?
Yeah, I mean, it's a sneaky shootout game against Arizona. 48 point total, 47 and a half game total here in Arizona. We get a dome. Arizona's been throwing the ball a little bit more aggressively with Brissett. I think that's good, for both sides of things from a fantasy perspective. And we do have some DVP stuff that inflates, the slot wide receivers as opposed to the outside wide receivers, which is good for Jacoby and Parker. They're not as good for Brian Thomas, who we still expect to lead in targets. So I think it's a pretty reasonable start, but it always comes down to what other options you have. We've got Jacoby for about 9 half PPR points and 11 full PPR points.
Adam W says, would you trade Quinshawn Judkins for Jamison Williams? My running backs are Jacobs, Genty, Judkins, Monangai, And C-Rod, these Genty spots aren't great coming up. You're probably still going to have to start him. If you need wide receiver help in a vacuum, I prefer Jameson Williams to Judkins. It's just how many touchdowns is Cleveland going to score? And when Judkins needs touchdowns, needs big time efficiency, it's hard to see it. So yeah, I think Jameson over Judkins for me if you're going to keep starting Genty here. And yeah, in a pinch, you could start Monangai or C-Rod. Um, all right, last couple here. Ludlow says Colby Parkinson or Darnell Washington. Now you're speaking our language here, Ludlow. He's getting deep. I will say Tyler Higbee going on IR opens up a decent amount here for Parkinson. So that's my gut right away. Just remove Higbee. Maybe Parkinson gets a big roll bump. This dude, Darnell Washington, is like 310 pounds playing tight end. Freak athlete, man. I like him too, but I think it would be Parkinson for me. What do you think, Leone?
Yeah, I think it's Parkinson too. I think this is a spot where the Rams should throw a bunch. We've got, we talk about this Bills funnel being a run funnel. The inverse of that is this Tampa Bay defense as a pass funnel. And that's been year over year with this coaching staff. So I don't think it's some sort of random thing. They really increase the rate at which opponents throw, regardless of game script. So that, and as you hit on, the Higbee injury should open up some volume for Parkinson. They've been playing a lot of multiple tight end sets too if they're able to get a lead.
Last one we're going to do today comes from Asriel Anderson. Says AJ Barner or Juwan Johnson. This might set the record for the most Juwan Johnson questions in one segment in the history of shows. AJ Barner, I'll note, did have 10 targets last week, which they got into a script that, was very favorable towards AJ Barner getting 10 targets, but also they've been using him on tush push stuff. So if it's close, maybe you get a tush push touchdown from Barner, but I think just on receiving volume, it's got to be Juwan. What do you think here, Leone Barner or Juwan Johnson?
Yeah, full PPR, it's definitely going to be Jawan. This script's going to be dramatically different week over week for Seattle. You said they got in kind of an unpredictable script. Now they're facing a Tennessee team that I expect Seattle to run on a whole bunch. Likely be protecting a lead for the majority of the game. Barner probably has more touchdown upside than Jawan. So if you're in a standard format, I could see going there. But half PPR, full PPR, I'd go with the volume.
All right. Circle back to our list here before we get out of here, recapping players we think are set up well down the stretch. Jameson Williams, 6 straight dome games, no Sam Laporta, route tree change, perfect run out. Derrick Henry, Hember is coming, and so are the soft matchups. Jets twice against the Bengals coming up. Trey Benson as potentially the feature back if he can get healthy for the Cardinals down the stretch. RJ Harvey on a bye this week, but had a really, really nice role in that last game before the bye. Did not put in the box score, but I think he will going forward. Brock Purdy at the controls of a healthy offense and a really bad defense leading some shootouts. And then Saquon Barkley needs to find space, should be able to find it as the Eagles hit the soft spot of their schedule here starting this week against the Dallas Cowboys. That is going to do it for another edition of the Bleacher Report Fantasy Football Show. Appreciate everyone hanging out and putting questions in the chat. Good luck to you in all of your games this weekend. For Leone, for everyone behind the scenes at Bleacher Report and everyone behind the scenes at ETR, I am Adam. Good luck, everybody.